Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on the penultimate episode of Vinland Saga, episode 23. I'm really excited. We only got 2 episodes left. I'm sad we're going to take a break after this. We've got to take a little bit of a break before season 2 comes out, but I'm really excited that it's not much of a break. So that's exciting, right? But yeah. Oh, so I don't have a lot of comments because I'm recording this a little bit ahead of YouTube. Patreon episode 22 came out on Patreon today, but episode 21 won't come out on YouTube till tomorrow. So for the final episode, I'll probably have some comments, and then whatever comments I get from those final episodes of season 1, I'm gonna write them down and leave them for season 2, and we'll kind of like start doing a little refresh before we start it, if I have any. So, but I have a couple comments here too. Mano, however you pronounce your name on Discord. We were on the Patreon Discord talking about Vinland Saga, and they brought up the idea that, yeah, throughout this entire series so far, every time Askeladd has said that he's done something in the name of Olaf, it's been a lie. And every time that he's swore in the name of Artorius, it's been the truth to him. And it's like, oh. So there's a moment like in episode 4 where Askeladd like swears to fight Thor's in the name of Olaf. And he says, oh, I smell something. You smell similar to me. And I'm like, well, is that true then? Because Askeladd kind of reveals in this last episode, he's got a lot of self-hatred towards himself. And that no, he might actually have known that Thor's was very different than Askeladd. And that's why he like respects him. He's like, you're not like me. You're better than me. So I thought that was really interesting. It's going to be kind of cool to kind of rewatch and pay attention to that and look for those moments with Askeladd as we go. But then the other thing was that Edgar, we had a really cool commentary on Discord about this, but Edgar talking about in the last episode that Thorfinn's scream, yeah, Thorfinn's VA was amazing and just does such a good job. I mean, he's at Sushi's VA, so it's kind of like, yeah, you know he can scream. He screams a lot in Bungo Stray Dogs. But that scream is just filled with, I like that Edgar described it as self-hatred, realization, like he figures out just how much of an idiot he's been by the end of it, and it's like a plea for help. It's just this strangled, garbled scream, like he's begging somebody to help him, and nobody will. And then in contrast, you have Askeladd saying, I'm just a Viking, and that line in itself is filled with so much self-hatred, but whereas Thorfinn's realizing what a baka he is, Askeladd has not only self-hatred for himself and what he's become, but self-awareness. He's like, yeah, I know why I've done this and what I've done. And he's just so self-aware about it. But he's just like, what do I do now? So it's, that last episode, it was such like a self-contained episode with the flashback and just the fight between him and Thorfinn. But setting up a lot of things. So now it's like, what is Thorfinn going to do? Because Thorfinn was leaving the group before. He was leaving the group instead of going with Askeladd and Canute towards the castle and towards the king. Maybe not necessarily the castle. He was going the opposite direction. So I'm like, is he going to go to Leif? What's he going to do? Is he going to realize he doesn't want to face Askeladd anymore? That it was stupid? Where are we going with this? So we've only got 2 episodes left of the season. So what are we going to be leading up to? Usually the penultimate episode is where stuff goes down, and you have your climax in the final episode and the resolution. So what are we going to set up this episode that's going to get resolved potentially in the next episode and will set up for season 2? I don't know. Also, there was some really cool, I think Edgar was the one that shared this as well on the Discord, the omnibus editions of Vinland Saga. I think there's maybe like 12 or 13 at this point, but they're so beautiful. I'm like, I wish I had more space because I would buy all the manga. I end up buying a lot digitally because I just don't have room. But you know, on that shelf back there, I could probably fit some Vinland Saga back there. I could probably fit some Vinland Saga back there. Maybe. We'll see. We were talking about like what sets I have, and I think that recently I've almost got all of Banana Fish. Almost all of Banana Fish. I would like to get Death Note eventually. I definitely want that manga. And I think Vinland Saga might be one of them because the artwork is, from the panels I've seen, it looks so good. So we'll see. We'll see about that. But I'm pretty excited to start episode 23 and see what we get. So without waiting any further, we're going to start episode 23 of Vinland Saga, the penultimate episode of season 1, and see what happens. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, so yeah, we're setting stuff up for this season finale, huh? Okay. All right. So going in the season finale, I'll put my thing up here. So we have the season finale next episode, and we'll put like not a bingo card, but like expectations. So the big question is about Thorfinn. Will he join Leif? I mean, at this point, why not? Because as he found out in the last episode, it was like him fighting Askeladd. It's just a losing battle. It's one of those, it's like too little too late sort of scenarios where, yeah, Thorfinn, honey, if you really want revenge on Askeladd, you should have started like years ago, getting on his good side and being under his wing and learning all these things. Now it's too late. Askeladd's just kind of like, I'm sick of you. I ain't going to take you in anymore. Bye. And he's just kind of like leaving him behind, which we'll talk about that in this episode. Because is he really leaving him behind? Askeladd has bigger fish to fry, and Thorfinn has just kind of fallen to the wayside. But like, if I were Thorfinn, I'd be like, yeah, you just found out last episode that you're still not good enough to kill Askeladd. You've been fighting a losing battle for 11 years. This person that clearly cares about you and wants to help you is here offering to take you in. Are you gonna go? And I could see some people in the comments maybe making reference of Leif to Ragnar. But I would say that Leif's not trying to coddle Thorfinn. He's just trying to get him away from the cycle. He's like, look at you, Thorfinn. You're not doing good. I owe it to your father. Your father didn't want you out in the middle of all this. I owe it to him to take you back. And then, yeah, we'll go to Vinland. We'll do all the things. It puts kind of a red flag on Leif, so I don't like that at all. But yeah, Leif's like, let's just leave. He's like, just leave all this behind. Go home and see your mom and your sister. See your mom while she's not in good health. Like, let's go. And what is the point of staying here? What is it getting you? And honestly, it's like Thorfinn was never really part of the Danish army anyway, so it's not like he's deserting them. Canute, he was technically one of Canute's guards, but I mean, Canute seemed pretty interested in him in this episode. Canute's like, where's Thorfinn at? And Askeladd's like, did you not see it? Whenever he's like, where's Thorfinn? I was like, did you not watch the last episode where he got beat to a pulp by Askeladd? He's like wounded. He's like a little wounded dog rounding about. But yeah, I really kind of want Thorfinn to leave with Leif, but I don't know. I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity or not. Or if Leif's going to die there in the city and Thorfinn has to make a decision of whether Thorfinn decides to go back home to see his sister and mom and head to Vinland without Leif, or if he decides to stick around with Askeladd and Canute in this endless cycle of battle. Because that's kind of what it is, right? So there's the question of what will Thorfinn do? I'm really hoping he goes with Leif, but I could foresee the circumstances happening in the next episode that would prevent that from happening, and that's very frustrating. But we'll see how it turns out. Then we have Askeladd. Now, Askeladd looks like he was surrounded. He's kind of in a pickle. It's like he was surrounded. What will happen with him? Is Sweyn going to try to kill him? What is Sweyn going to do? I don't think Sweyn would kill him outright in front of everybody. I think that seems too suspicious. Sweyn is smart, though. I feel like he's going to try to figure out what the connection is between Askeladd and Wales. Askeladd just straight up telling Thorkel about Wales. I was like, you have a lot of trust in Thorkel to just tell him. But I guess he's thinking that Thorkel's enough of a wild card that he won't say anything. But I'm like, you just entrusted everything to him. Like, that's the weird thing, is that Askeladd, he entrusted nothing to Bjorn. Ever. Nothing to Bjorn. This, for 20 years. Bjorn's like, you never tell me anything about yourself. Ever. And here, Askeladd tells Thorkel, who he's been with for like half a year to a year, tells Thorkel this whole backstory that he didn't tell Bjorn in 20 years. So it makes me wonder, with Askeladd's character, if he's realizing that he can trust maybe like 1 to 2 Danes. Maybe Thorkel and Canute he can trust. Maybe they're the only Danes he can trust. I'm at this point, right? He doesn't trust Gunnar at all. He thinks Gunnar's going to betray him, which I'm on that boat too. But yeah, So he tells Thorkel all about why Wales is a bad idea for him. And I love Thorkel's response where he's like, oh, rough for you, buddy. It's like, it's the Avatar meme where he's like, it sounds rough, buddy. It's like, but yeah, there's a lot going on in this episode. I don't think they're going to just straight up attack Askeladd. I don't think so. But I love that conversation Askeladd has where he says that his luck runs out in the 11th hour. He's like, I'm doing real good until that 11th hour, and then things get dire, and then the clock starts back over again. It's literally Cinderella. Askeladd is literally Cinderella. He's about to turn into a pumpkin in the next episode. I think that Sweyn, he's going to try to do like a power move or do something, or he's going to make Askeladd like the leader, the commander of the army that's going to invade Wales. Be like, you're going to be on the front lines leading the charge and invading Wales personally, to put Askeladd out there in front and see how it makes him uncomfortable. Because that look that he gave in this episode, it was like the moment that they said Wales, he was like, and it was just for a moment, but Floki saw it. Floki the flunky, let me tell you. So yeah, we'll skip this intro. Anytime you start the intro. So there's this whole thing with sunlight, right? There's this whole thing about dawn and the sun. And the episode starts with it coming through the clouds. And it's going to come back again and have significance with Thorfinn later on. Because here we have the dawn and we have the hall and everything. So we are in York. Okay, Northumbria, York. So I was like, did we leave York? But I didn't see the entail of that. So we are in York and they're having the council. Okay. And everybody from all around is coming. And it's like all these nary to do, well-to-do people with their fancy swords and everything, like coming in, doing their thing. And then there's Thorfinn. Sweet, sweet Thorfinn. Who's just like, what the fudge? Just trekking through the mud. So we have the dawn and the sun. And then with Thorfinn, we have the idea of him just trudging through the mud and other things. I'm sure there's feces and like all sorts of nastiness in that mud. Him landing face first in it, gross. But he is at his lowest point, right? Thorfinn, that scream in the last episode was, like Edgar was saying, a plea for help. He's like, I have realized I've wasted all this time. I've wasted everything. What do? I'm helpless. I just want somebody to reach out and help me, which is where Leif comes in, right? But old habits are hard to break. And Thorfinn is, if anything, he is stubborn. He's stubborn and he's pessimistic. He doesn't see how anything's going to be good, right? How is this even going to work? And he's just beaten to a pulp at this point. His arms all wrecked, his legs wrecked. He gets nudged by a guy and falls over like it was nothing, right? And the guy's like, oh, and then this guy got stabbed and he didn't even notice, as they just trounce past Thorfinn and do the same thing to him. So we go to the council, right? And the council's interesting because we have all these guys here and they're all talking about the rumors about Harold. And it's interesting to note that Sweyn named his, I'm assuming Harold's the older one, the elder son after the former king, right? So there's that legacy kind of tied to that name anyway. But they're all the people are like, well, the king must have chose Harold because there was an assassination attempt on Canute. He's like, I bet the supporters of Canute are furious. And he's like, it's just a rumor. And everybody's all like, hush, hush. And they're rethinking their plans and everything. And they're like, well, no, Thorkel's joined Canute. So Canute's probably fine. And they're like, well, Thorkel's, I like the way they say this. So these two guys here, they bring up this more than compensates for the loss of Ragnar. So there is some Canute supporters. And the supporters of Canute are fearful of Sweyn, that he's going to try to kill Canute to let Harold win. But then they say that Thorkel, there's this question of, is Thorkel equal to Ragnar? I'm very curious by the fact that a lot of these people that are Canute supporters seem to think that Ragnar was going to be the one that would govern. And then Thorkel here is like the military might. So what's interesting is that these guys that are talking, they're like, oh, well, Thorkel compensates for the loss of Ragnar because, yeah, we lost Ragnar, but we got Thorkel and all his men. Like, he's super strong. But then this guy goes, he's like, Thorkel doesn't know how to govern. And Canute is not going to be able to control him. He's too much for Canute to handle. So they were planning on supporting Canute because they had Ragnar. Because Ragnar was a voice of reason and would be able to govern. He'd be able to like help be a leader in situations. And then Canute would have the authority, but Ragnar would have the wisdom and leadership. Interesting. And whereas Thorkel is the stronger of the two, he doesn't have the governing prowess. So they're like, Canute's not going to be able to control him. He's going to do his own thing and it could be chaotic. Which is not a wrong thought to think. But we've seen that Canute is like, Canute and Thorkel are totally fine right now. Because Thorkel's just along for the ride. Thorkel's like, ah, all right. But there's someone else that joined Canute. His name is Askeladd. But nobody knows him. So interesting. So it's interesting that the king and Canute enter here. And we get that shot of that crown. That ever-present crown that king has to wear. That he's, you know, weighing under it, right? And then there's Floki, of course. And Floki staring out at the crowd. And everyone's just so silent. Like they're so reverent of the king. And then in comes Canute, Askeladd, and Thorkel the Tall and Gunner. And I love that Thorkel's like, there's lots of food. Nice. I'm with Thorkel. I only show up for these fancy smanchy dinner occasions, like for work if there's free food. But Askeladd's just being ever so watchful. And Canute says, where's Thorfinn? And Askeladd's like, well, there's no need to be worried about your safety. He's like, I kind of beat the snot out of him, remember? Yeah, I'm not paying attention to him right now. So I do want to make note that Canute asks for Thorfinn. I've almost given up on my Canute and Thorfinn ship. It seems to have sunk to the bottom of the North Sea. But you know what? Thorfinn asking, or Canute asking about Thorfinn, it's a hope. But Askeladd's not too concerned about Thorfinn right now. He's like, he's not on my radar. He's a baka. Not worrying about it, right? He's like, we've got bigger fish to fry. He's like, there's no reason to feel worried for your safety here. Because no one is foolish enough to shed blood in this place. I guess so. And so then, yeah, they pour the wine. Yeah. Maybe not foolish enough to shed Canute's blood, but I have no doubt they'd shed some blood. Oh, make note, Canute gets like the best fashion. Now he has this like blue overcoat and like the red garments and everything. Canute always looks so stylish. But it's interesting that Sweyn is so much taller than him still, even though. And Thorkel's just eating sausage the whole time. He's like, I'm just eating my kraut here. Don't mind me. And everybody's waiting to hear what happens. There's a lot of blondes in this room. A lot of blondes in the old Imperial Council. But then Thorfinn. And I love that the slave girl sees him. The slave girl sees him and is concerned. When the slave girl that's getting drug away is concerned for Thorfinn, that's when you know things are pretty bad. And she's from the OP, right? Interesting. I like had in my mind watching the OP. I never said anything, but I just had in my mind that she'd be like an important player in all this. And she's just a girl passing by. But what she sees is Thorfinn at his lowest point. And even the slave drivers are like, we don't need him. But yeah, him just sitting there like just battered and bruised. And then he hears Askeladd say, you're a stupid kid. And I just love the animation on Thorfinn. Like he just looks like the most wounded puppy. And he chases after him, right? But I'm glad he took the sword out of his arm sleeve there. He's not Edward Scissorhands anymore. But he chases after Askeladd just blindly running after him. And that's such like an interesting visualization of Thorfinn just blindly chasing Askeladd. Like Askeladd said, he is chasing him like a dog chasing after food. Just, there's no even real purpose anymore, right? He's just trying to find him. Just chasing blindly after him. And he reaches for the guy to grab him, but it's not Askeladd at all. It's just another guy. And I love when the guy hit him, Thorfinn just went, just like slammed down into the mud. And they're like, it's just a kid. And Thorfinn turns to walk away, but the guy slaps him on the back and just knocks him down instantly. Like, Thorfinn doesn't even put up a fight anymore. He's like, how dare you touch these dirty hands of mine? And they like go to pick a fight with him. And then he slaps him on the back and that's when he falls. Yeah. He says, say something. And Thorfinn can't even defend himself. He's just too gone, right? And they're like, are you making fun of us? And the thing of it is, it's like, no, he's not. And so they tell him to pay up, but I'm like, and at first I was like, is anybody going to stop him? But then Thorfinn manages to save himself. He's like, look, he's like, I'm injured, but I'm capable of defending myself. And he doesn't even try. Thorfinn's not even trying. He just does it just without, like, he's just barely moving and he knocks them out. Oh. He's barely trying. And that's when the one guard guy shows back up that was trying to catch him with the assassins. Yeah, and he's like, it's you again. And Thorfinn's like, what did I do? And they just throw him in a cell. So yeah, Thorfinn they're like, you'll be notified of your punishment later. So Thorfinn, he can defend himself, but there is no fight left in him. He's just he has hit rock bottom in that cell. And I was really afraid when he got thrown in the cell. I'm like, well, hell, Askeladd and Canute, they're not going to know where he is. They're not going to know to ask. They're not going to go up to this guy and be like, hey, did our rabid wolf child get arrested for something, get thrown into a cell? They're not going to know. And if they have to head out, I mean, in the past, the thing about it is, in the past, regardless of how Askeladd has felt about Thorfinn, he's always left Thorfinn knowing that Thorfinn's going to blindly chase him like a dog looking for food. He has relied on that this entire series. He got on to Thorfinn about it last episode. He chided him and made fun of him for it. He was like, I can read you like a book. He's like, I've left you behind so many times and you just blindly come following after me, asking for more, begging for more trauma. And here it's like, I'm sure if Askeladd leaves with Canute, he's probably going to tell Canute, oh, don't worry, Thorfinn will be back. He'll come back. He always finds me, right? He's somewhere around the city. He'll come looking for me. But if he's been in the cell, and if he goes with Leif and does not follow Askeladd, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go. But yeah, old Thorfinn. He's the prince's guard. And they say the prince is attending the Imperial Council right now. Like, there's no way his guard will be walking around town. So that's the thing. They have determined that he is not Canute's guard. Which, in the long run, is probably a good thing. That will probably give Thorfinn a little bit more freedom if he's not seen as the guard of Canute. But yeah, there's no way the royal prince's guard would be just lying around in town. And they just leave him in that cell. So then we come back to the actual council, the elders of Denmark. And they talk about how they've taken over England and what they're going to do. And he's like, my wish has finally come true. England has come under my control. And so he says the achievement is all thanks to your valiant efforts in battle. And he's like, in addition, my old friend Thorkel. And Thorkel's like, just eat meat like I don't care. And my son Canute have returned to us thanks to the protection of the gods. And this is like, he's like, it's an unexpected stroke of good fortune. And that smile, it's such a show. He's like putting on the politician smile, being like, come on, son. I didn't try to kill you. You're not going to try to get people to sway their opinions of me. Now, are you? No. And that hug between him and Canute is like the most loveless hug that I've ever seen between a father and son. It's just like two bodies barely pressed against one another. And Canute's just like, this is all for show. And everyone's just standing there watching. And he's like, I'm going to put Mercia, part of our new territory, under your rule. And everybody's like, just with bated breath, waiting to hear, let's make this land a good country together. And he's like, Thorkel, support my son. Thorkel's just like, whatever, sure. Okay. He's like, that's my wish. And he's like, okay, yeah. And they're like, Mercia. And they say, that's the most prosperous land within England. So, Canute is given Mercia. He's given Mercia. But I agree with the one guy. They're like, oh, well, he's been given Mercia, so that must be a sign of good faith. He's going to put him in charge of the most prosperous lands. That's a good thing, right? But then the one guy here says maybe the rumors were just rumors after all. But he's countered with, no, you don't know that for sure. If the rumors really are true, then of course he'd say that. Like, yeah, if the rumors are true and Canute's been targeted, the king is going to do anything to dissuade those rumors so that there's not like chaos and dissent amongst the ranks. So he's like, kill my son. I'm giving him the best land in the kingdom. Why would I kill him? You know, it's all front to try to persuade them that nothing's wrong. I'll reward you as well in accordance with your achievements in battle. Let's continue to fight with valor in Ireland, our next battleground. So they make note at first that they're going to attack Ireland. That's next on the agenda. We've conquered England, now let's move to Ireland. And everybody's like, okay. And Askeladd, he says, Ireland is the land of our previous king, where our previous king Harold lost. He was humiliated by Brian Boru, the insolent tyrant. So, Canute's, I guess it's not the grandpa because they don't do like a monarchy. It's just like whoever inherits the kingdom, right? So it could be a monarchy, but I don't know if Harold's actually Sweyn's dad. But Harold lost to Brian Boru in Ireland, and they're going to take back that kingdom from him. That's the plan, right? And Askeladd's just pleased as punch. He's like, victory is mine. He's like, this is perfect. The king's doing just what I expected. He's like, I figured he would go to Ireland. Just all is going according to cake. He has no counter to my strategy. And it's a battle of wits and I'll come out ahead. And I love that he takes this opportunity that Askeladd's like reveling in the fact that he's outsmarted King Sweyn. He's like, King Sweyn is playing right into my hands just like I predicted he would. And he takes this moment of like reveling in it to look over at Floki and be like, you're a loser. Like he just looks over at Floki and he's like, I like that look on your face. It's blank and dumb. He's like, you're going to have to draw the losing ticket this time. And Askeladd is just so pleased. He's like, I'm the one who's going to be in control of this fight. I have all the pieces. I can do it. So yeah, Askeladd. We'll put Askeladd right here. Askeladd, he says, I have all the pieces and the control. I can do this. Everything is going according to plan. I've outsmarted Sweyn. We've got Ireland. Whatever his plans are involving Ireland. We don't know what his plans involving Ireland are. But whatever they are, he's like, I've got it all figured out. Is he going to stage a coup? Is he going to kill the king like on the way to Ireland? Are they going to have the Irish help them? We don't know, but he's got a plan, right? And I love that the king interrupts and says, however, this land still harbors impudent fools who show no respect for their king. So he's like, before we go to Ireland, we need to nip all the dissent in the bud. We need to take all of these countries that think, these little lands and territories that think that they're better than us and show them a lesson and tell them who's in charge of all this. He's like, I wanted to let you know about this. And Askeladd's like, what? He's like, I sent a messenger to urge them to become my vassals, but they refused twice. So, but here's the thing. He sent a letter for them to become vassals. Was that before or after like the treaty with Canute? And they still refused. So, because they think that Askeladd's going to overthrow the king by putting Canute in charge. They are sowing seeds of rebellion that would threaten our new territory. And we must do everything to nip it in the bud. He's like, we need to stop this dissent before it gets too bad. Too worse. And then him stretching out the hands and saying, Wales. That one look where he's just like, Wales is the problem. And it's like, of all countries you could have picked, We'll show the inhabitants of Wales the power of the true king. And we'll attack in the spring. Like, we'll attack them before we go to Ireland. Just nip it in the bud before we head out. Be prepared. And everybody's like, okay. And then when Floki opens his eyes, when he opened his eyes and looked up, I was waiting for him to look to Askeladd, because I was like, what is Askeladd's face going to be like? And he's just terrified. It's just like the most terrified expression. He's shocked that the king is taking the time out of this major battle to take care of Wales. Because that would be so easy to make him so paranoid, right? For a split second, he got pale. And then we cut to Thorfinn. And we see Leif come to see him. I'm sorry, but... And I like that Thorfinn thought that the only ones that were going to come get him were the messengers. He thought Leif wouldn't come back. He doubted that Leif would come and help him. But he did. And when Leif steps down, like, Leif is this big source of light in this episode. Like, Thorfinn is in the darkness of this cell, right? And then Leif represents this coming light, right? Because the moment he shows up, he looks like a damn angel. He shows up and he just has the light framed around him. He's like the only source of light in this. And I love that he just sits on his, like, he folds his legs and sits on the ground with Thorfinn. And he's like, look, he's like, I can't understand everything you've been through these last 11 years. But he's like, I made a promise to Thors that I would take you back home. He's like, I'm not doing it just for your dad or for your family. I'm doing it for me. I want you to come back home. He's like, I panicked over you. Like, you know? And Thorfinn's just like, well, it's none of your business. Go away. And just Leif in this whole scene. Leif is so wholesome and so kind. And he seems so genuinely concerned for Thorfinn. He's like, come on, Thorfinn. He's like, come on. Like, you can just tell he just feels so sad for him. He's like, it must have been really hard for you. He's like, because you were all alone. He's like, I can't understand what you've gone through. But, like, just the light coming in the cell, it's so beautiful. And Thorfinn, I was like, Thorfinn, listen to him. I'm like, come on. And Leif is like, okay, I get it. As long as Askeladd's alive, you'll never be at peace. If you say it's still not enough. And for a second, I thought that Leif was going to be like, well, I'll go kill Askeladd. I'm like, no, you won't. You'll die, old man. But he's like, no, just leave him. He's like, you're probably right. Probably wouldn't work. And him just like about to cry and covering his mouth and everything and saying he remembers it the moment that he lost Thors. I'm like, Leif is so wholesome. And he's like, come on. He's like, Ylva. He's like, the smile on the face when you were a kid. Like all Leif wants is to have Thorfinn back from before. And that shot of Thorfinn's face where he's just sitting there in the cell, like, Thorfinn, you know, is thinking there is no way he is going to ever be that child again. He has seen so much in his lifetime. There is no way he is going to go back to being that kid that he was before. It's not possible. Mm-mm. And just he just looks like such despair. And Leif being like, he tells him the story about, you know, when he was stranded on the ice. He's like, I was all by myself. He's like, I was a lone wolf like you. I didn't have anybody to rely upon. He's like, but one thing kept me going, and that was the idea of home. So the idea of home, right? And what that can mean, right? And it's very interesting how he talks about this, because the way that he talks about it is that for Thorfinn, Iceland is not home. And you would think it's interesting. You would think that you're like, well, Thorfinn, his family is in Iceland, so why wouldn't it be home? But for Thorfinn, he's like, I can't ever go back there without thinking of all of these various things. He's like, all of my sins are going to be embedded inside of me if I go back to Iceland. He's like, if I go back there and see my mother and my sister, he's like, and I stay there, he's like, I'm going to constantly be plagued with the idea that, one, I could have gone back years ago and didn't. Two, I wasted all this time. Three, I lost my father because I was stupid enough to abandon this place that I could have been safe at this whole time. Like, he's just going to be plagued and haunted by all these memories and these, like, regrets. So for him, Iceland is not his home. But what he sees as a possible home is the concept of Vinland. Vinland to him is like a second chance. It's what his father got. It almost seems like to Thor's, Iceland was his Vinland. It was his second chance. His way to get away from the cycle of violence and start anew. That was what it was to him, but it can't be that for Thorfinn. So Thorfinn's like, Vinland is my chance at a second start, at not having any more regrets. That's why he kept wanting to ask Leif how it was, right? And that's such a curious thing, because Thorfinn is looking ahead. He's looking ahead at the future and what could be, right? He's looking ahead at the future and what could be for him. And Leif's trying to encourage him, like, yeah, let's go do that. Let's think of the future. For Askeladd, what's interesting about that is that for him, Wales is home. But it's tied to the past and what was or has been. For Askeladd, it's not that he sees a future for him in Wales. No, that's not it at all. I'm pretty sure Askeladd expects that he's going to die on the battlefield. But for him, Wales is his past. It was his home. It was his mother's home. It has all this connotation and emotion tied to it that he can't escape, right? And so he wants to keep that legacy intact, right? So it's a very... Askeladd's concept of home and Thorfinn's concept are so vastly different, but they both are driven by that idea of home, right? Of what it could be and what it has been. And so I like he says, no matter how frozen the sea gets, Leif says that as they're on the ship, like about to like go get knocked aside into the ocean, and he like raises his fist as he sees land. And then the boat like crashes down. I love that shot where he says, it's still this concept of home. And he says, a sailor is always fighting a battle against the sea. Always. Just like a warrior. So he's like, yeah, I may not be a warrior because I didn't fight in all these battles on land, but when you go out to sea, you're always at battle against it. So you are like a warrior. And he says, with their honor at stake. And he's like, that's the thing. He's like, for me, fighting as a warrior. And that's kind of the thing, too. Leif's like, a true warrior is one that fights without a sword. So that's really interesting that you have Leif saying that he was fighting for his honor. But out at sea, maybe he is a true warrior, because out at sea, you can't fight with a sword, right? You can't battle the ocean with a sword. So he's like, I'm out here at sea without a sword. I'm just battling for my honor and what I consider to be right. And what I consider to be valuable to me. And so maybe that does make Leif a true warrior in his own special way. And you can tell Thorfinn's listening, but he's still not moved. And he's like, when Thor's died, when you disappeared, I swore on my honor. He's like, I'm not saying this for you. I'm saying this for me. He's like, I'm not doing this just for you because I know you'll deny it, but I'm saying this for myself. No matter what happens, I'm taking you back to Iceland, your home. It's my responsibility to Thor's. And Thorfinn's just like, well, but that place is no longer my home. So he's like, it's not my home anymore. It's not going to work. So then we have these lords come up, Eirik, son of Eirik Ivar, and basically the king gives him like a bunch of silver and gold and some land and says, thank you for your contributions and all that jazz. And so meanwhile, while this is happening, he's looking at Floki and he's like, Askeladd doesn't look any different. Are you sure that something happened? And Floki's like, yes, for a moment. Just for a moment. I saw that his face paled when you mentioned Wales. And I'm like, oh my God. So he actually didn't know anything about it. It was just a coincidence. And he tells the king to take note. So that's interesting. So Floki is not as dumb as he appears. He's a little bit more perceptive than he seems on the outside, eh? And then we come back to poor Askeladd. And Askeladd is losing his mind. He's like, oh, ha ha ha, everything's great. Don't be a pig, Thorkel. And inside he is internally screaming. I should have wore the internally screaming for this episode because it would have been so perfect. And he's like, so as he's talking, he's thinking of all of these bad things that are happening. And he's like, what's going on, Sweyn? So what I love is we get inside Askeladd's head and just see how he is trying to calculate everything. Like Askeladd is trying to be the master planner in all this, but he's hit a wall with whales. And he's like, what is going on, Sweyn? What's happening? And he's like, He's like, do you know the connection to me and Wales? He's like, no, impossible. Nobody can know. Not even Floki knows. So he's like, it must be a coincidence, which it surprisingly is. But he's like, the real problem is that Wales is going to turn into a sea of fire in the spring. They're not going to be able to defend themselves. So he's like, my home that I've been trying to defend is going to be under assault. What do I do? And I love that we do all the angles of his head. Like we connect to all the different angles of him being like, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? It's great. He's like, damn. I love it. Think, I don't have time. How can I solve this before spring? Should I lead a revolt with the prince? No, Thorkel's army of 500 are the only ones I could count on. So yeah, he's like trying to think of all the different scenarios. He's like, well, I could lead a revolt, but I'd have to use the 500 men of Thorkel. Is he going to be okay with that? What's going to happen? Our army doesn't have enough men. And he's like, it's going to take some time for the generals to join me. And like his brain is just going into overdrive. He can't process it all. He's like, I could instigate a rebellion against the English. No, Wales would end up becoming on the battlefield anyway. And there's like thunder crashing and all this. And his brain looks like it's about to explode. And he says, stop trying to think of a plan that involves a fight. He's like, stop being a Viking, right? So he says, stop thinking like a Viking. I love that we get, because we've not really got much of the internal thought with Askeladd this entire series. We've seen things like come to fruition with his plans and it all kind of be laid out, but we haven't really gotten the chance to one-on-one like get into Askeladd's brain and see the plan unfold. And here it does. And it's like I love the idea that he is in constant battle with who he thinks he is and who he thinks he's become. Because he's like, stop trying to think of a plan that involves a fight. You sound like a Dane. Like he said in the last episode, he's a Viking. So it's him trying to wrestle his heritage and who he thinks he is with what he's had to become and how it's infiltrated his mind and his decision-making. It's so good. He's like, one of the king's assassins might try to go after Canute in the midst of the confusion. He's like, I've got to think of all these different angles, right? And like, his brain's just overloading. He's even bringing Thorfinn into all this. Meanwhile, while he's trying to figure out all this stuff, we go back to Thorfinn. Like, it's a great contrast where Askeladd is having 1,000 decisions being brought up to him at once. Thorfinn has one decision to worry about. That's really it. Askeladd has like 1,000 chess pieces he's trying to manipulate at once. Thorfinn just needs to decide one thing. Is he going to go with Leif or not? And that's the difference where we're at in this. And he says, home. And that look on his face where he just says, don't talk to me about home now. He's like, I don't have a home. I haven't had a home. It's not my home anymore. I've lived away from it long enough. I've lived my home. It was only my home for 6 years. I've been away for 11. Doesn't count anymore. And then Leif's like, fine, I'll bring out the Vinland card. I'll play the Vinland card. If that's what it takes to get you to listen to me. And he describes Vinland. And he's like, Thorfinn. He's like, it's Vinland. That one place we talked about all those years ago. He says, after you go home and things have settled down, let's head to Vinland together. He's like, come on. It's like all of us. And you can see Thorfinn kind of like hunching onto himself. Like he wants to do it, but he's like, I don't know. He's like, why? And he says, you said it too, right? He's like, you said that Thors wanted to go too. Thors came to Iceland to escape battle. That was his Vinland. If he were still alive, he'd want to go there too. And we see his dad walking through the fields. I'm sure he would try to go there as well. Mm-hmm. Yep. And Leif is like a place without slaves or war, where everyone can live in peace. A warm and fertile land. Let's build a country like that. Yeah, so it's that concept though too that's so neat, and the sunlight coming in and like the dawn. It's nice because a few episodes ago we had the dawn coming in on Canute trying to make his plans as well. So it's funny that you have Leif and Canute both talking about this paradise, right? But the thing is that Leif wants to run to the paradise, and Canute wants to convert what they have to that paradise. But they both are wanting essentially the same thing. And it's like, well, how realistic is that? Let's find out. And he's like, if it's in Vinland, I'm sure we could do it. Oh, Leif, honey. And Thorfinn, it's like Thorfinn, like, just seeing the sunlight coming in on him, and, like, this is his chance. Like, this is your chance to run off and go and do it. Like, go with Leif. Come on. It's like, I was like, at that point, you just want to yell at Thorfinn. You're like, just do the damn thing. Askeladd's just going to keep using you. Just leave him and go. I mean, Canute kind of cares about you, but not enough to not go with Leif. He cares about you more. Yeah, because Thorfinn gets up and looks at him. And then we come back, so we don't know. So the big question is, what is Thorfinn going to do? We don't know. And then we come back to Askeladd talking with Thorkel. And then Thorkel's like, so speaking of whales, he's like, how did you escape me by going there? He's like, that's where you went to when you ran away from me. How'd that work? Thorkel's like, how'd you manage that? And you can just see on Askeladd's face that he's like, aha, he's figured me out. Because Thorkel's like, what's your trick? Why did the people of Wales help you Danes? That doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? So I figured that at this point, Askeladd's like, well, my options are I either don't say anything and just tell him a lie, or I tell him the truth. And we talked about this before the reaction, that anytime he's talking about Artorias or Wales, he's telling the truth. So my theory is Askeladd's like, well, if I lie to Thorkel, he'll probably start asking around. And that will get people onto me and be suspicious, and that will blow up my face. So he's like, Thorkel's the type of person to be blunt around. He's like, I can be honest with Thorkel and tell him not to tell anybody, and he will, just because it's like out of spite of everybody else. And when he asks him, Askeladd's like, welp, my mother's grave is there. And Thorkel's like, huh. Like, it's like, read between the lines. He says, that land is my home. And so the fact that Askeladd says it's his home, and then Leif is told what's his home, that's a big difference too. Like, Askeladd saying something is his home versus Thorfinn, who doesn't really have one. So, or at least in Thorfinn's mind, he doesn't. And he talks about Wales having poor land, but the people are full of pride, which kind of relates to him as a kid, right? And Thorkel's like, oh, I see. Well, that's rough, buddy. Because they're about to kill them all. Sorry about that. Sorry about us attacking your homeland. That's kind of sucks for you. And he says, no. He's like, the information's just between us. Tell no one. I'm still curious about this white robe that Askeladd has, like, draped over him. It looks like a Roman robe, like that's something that Socrates or like a Greek philosopher would wear. I'm like, why are you wearing that white robe? Does he have a weapon under it? Does he have a weapon he's going to attack the king with? What are we doing? Why? What's happening? Why does he have this robe on? It's very Roman and very traditional. It does not seem very Danish, right? It's curious because he clearly has on stuff under it. So I'm like, is he hiding something underneath that robe? And Thorkel's like, well, Thorkel's like, I'm not a gossipy bitch. I ain't gonna tell on you, Askeladd. I like that Thorkel's like, do I look like a gossip? No. He's like, I just like finding out stuff. And then they call him up, Askeladd, son of Olaf. And Askeladd's like, what now? Why? I love that, just that the angle of it. The angle of him just being like, what now? Like, oh, it's so good, right? And Thorkel's like, well, you gonna go up there? That's bold. And he goes up there by himself. And Canute's like, so at this point, it's like, what are they gonna do? Yeah, his arm's wrapped up. His body's wrapped up. Something's up. And then everybody's just staring at him and he's all alone. And he says, why is luck never on my side in the 11th hour? Oh. But then he smiles like, guess I'm going to make the best of it. Like, that's just, that's so Askeladd. He's like, luck's not on my side, but guess I'll just do what I do best. So, yeah. So there's lots of questions. A lot of this episode was Leif trying to convince Thorfinn to go with him back home. And I'm glad that Leif is like back in the picture to try to convince Thorfinn. I'm like, come on. I'm like, Thorfinn, at this point, you could just... I feel like this whole Ireland-Wales business is about to become a big old massacre along with the king facing Canute. I'm like, Thorfinn, you should get out of this whole massacre while you still can, because this just looks like it's going to be beyond you. So the question is, will Thorfinn join Leif? Askeladd, he's surrounded. Are they going to attack him? Is he going to attack back? Are they going to try to like do some kind of like psychological wordplay to manipulate him? What's going to happen? What will happen to Sweyn? Will we see Harold? At this point, I don't think we're going to see Harold until season 2. I feel like if we are going to see Harold, it's going to be like a brief, like snippet of him to tease season 2, but we're not going to see him till the second season. Canute. Will him and Thorkel continue their misadventures in Mercia? Are they going to Mercia? Will they attack Wales? Will we get to see Ireland in season 2 or Wales? I don't know. I'm curious to know why Sweyn asked Askeladd to come up. I don't think he's going to attack him, because that would be like, they said that everybody was pretty much safe from bloodshed there, and it's right in front of Canute. I think Sweyn's going to try to ask him a question that will out him as being Welsh, or that will make him have an emotional reaction that will confirm Sweyn's suspicions, right? So there's that. But yeah, they have no clue where Thorfinn is with Leif. I don't want Leif to die in the next episode. I want Leif to get out with Thorfinn unscathed. I want them to be okay. Like, just let them escape together. It'll be fine. I want that to happen. But I don't know if it will or not. And then, I don't know. I just don't want Leif to die. I don't want Askeladd to die. I don't want any of them to die, to be honest. Even Sweyn, if he died, Floki died, But I don't want any of our main characters to die next episode. And I'm a little worried that everything is setting up. This episode was too calm. It was too calm. We've had such crazy bananas episodes this whole series. And this episode was like the calm before the storm. It was very subdued, and it was like, what's about to happen? And I'm a little worried about that, if I'm being honest. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm very, very curious to see what goes down. Next episode's the season finale. I don't know. I try not to get myself hyped up for episodes coming up. I've had a lot of people say the last episode of this series is their favorite. And I don't like to get hyped. I'm like, I want to go in as blind as possible, because sometimes I raise my expectations too much. And then when it doesn't meet the level of hype that I think it is, then I'm like, oh, well, that was fine. And I don't want to do that for this series, right? So I'm going to be very curious to see, after people have told me it's one of their favorite episodes, what all happens. Is it going to be a red wedding? I don't know, but we'll find out, right? Right? So I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers for episode 24. But I'm very curious to know what y'all thought of this episode. I'm excited to see what happens next week. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with the season finale of Vinland Saga. Bye.